Bitcoin became more interesting to me because it started to rally before all of the other inflation things rallied. And that's when I realized that whether it was demographics or whether it was the distribution of wealth, the masses were not worried about COVID the same way that a wealthy person perched behind their walls with their guards was worried. Then the next year, my son turned $700 into $70,000 and then subsequently lost it all when the winter of crypto came. But in that time where I said to him, hey, you're 13, I've got a bunch of portfolio managers that work for me. I want you to come in like you're a portfolio manager. I want me to explain your positions and how you've made this money. And we went on a ski trip and he talked to me about it. And it was phenomenal. He knew every token. He knew why he was invested in them. Some of them are still around today. And it made me realize that there was something here that was interesting to him. And when I asked him how he learned all of this, it was through Reddit and through Twitter. And that's when the phrase pump and dump was brought to my occasion. That's when all of these things, and I went, so this is a real thing. Like, this is something my kid turned into real money. He knows about it. It's no different than the game that I play. It's ideas that are hopefully going to be monetized. That's no different than Apple or all these things that I'm involved in. So I listened to my...
The SEC just unexpectedly canceled its crypto startup rulemaking vote, leaving the industry without the parallel regulatory path it had been counting on after the Clarity Act missed the Senate recess. The White House has scheduled a meeting for August 19th with executives from Coinbase, Ripple, and Kraken. Bitcoin is at $63,460 with 390 million in weekly ETF outflows, keeping momentum subdued. UBS held nearly $90 million in BlackRock's IBIT ETF in its most recent quarterly filing, and Jordi Visser, the macro strategist and former hedge fund CIO, says the 60-40 portfolio is not just dead, but has been replaced by the most dangerous financial setup of his career. AI will replace white-collar workers first, not last. The Fed's inflation models are structurally wrong because they cannot account for AI-driven productivity, and Bitcoin and gold are the only real assets left that offer genuine protection in a world where every paper asset is being diluted at machine speed. Let's watch and discover. The SEC unexpectedly canceled its scheduled vote on new crypto startup rulemaking rules, citing scheduling issues, a cancellation that landed just days after the Clarity Act left Washington without a Senate vote before the 5-week August recess. Galaxy Research has now placed the probability of Clarity Act passage in 2026 at just 10%. The two regulatory paths the market had been counting on, Clarity Act for market structure and the SEC's parallel rulemaking for capital raising exemptions, are now both paused simultaneously, removing the specific institutional demand catalyst that several analysts had cited as the trigger for Bitcoin breaking above the $67,000 to $70,000 resistance zone. The most important event of the week is not a CPI print or an FOMC meeting. It is Tuesday's White House meeting scheduled for August 19th, bringing President Trump together with executives from Coinbase, Ripple, and Kraken. This is the highest-level executive branch to crypto industry dialogue since the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve was established. The agenda items expected, the status of the Clarity Act, the SEC's canceled rulemaking, and the broader regulatory framework for stablecoins under the Genius Act. A positive signal from the White House on accelerating clarity, even without a specific legislative commitment, would be the most powerful near-term catalyst available in the regulatory vacuum left by the Clarity Act delay and the SEC cancellation. UBS's Q2 2026 filing reveals the bank held $89.7 million in BlackRock's IBIT ETF. The world's largest wealth manager is now a disclosed Bitcoin ETF holder, regardless of any regulatory timeline.
If everything is free, then why does the value of Bitcoin matter just like the other things don't matter? So I haven't thought about it other than as a hedge against the other wealth that's been there, because what should happen up until abundance is Bitcoin should outperform every asset on the planet. Everything. Not maybe a company for a year. But over the course of every 5 years, you should look back and be like, what was the best performing asset? That was Bitcoin. And that's what's happened since its beginning. And that's the way I believe it is, that it should just outperform everything over time.
And this is not about to stop happening.
Not in my mind.
What's your answer to someone who says that a Bitcoin at 60K or 80K or 100K or 120K is expensive or is too expensive today in 2026? I missed it.
Again, everyone has their own opinion, and most people that I speak with, most of the people I speak with, it's funny, I spend one leg in the crypto world, one leg in the TradFi world. The video I do every week on YouTube is 80%, 90% TradFi. I'm about to start a second one, which will be 90% crypto. And the reason is because I believe at the end of this year that those people who don't believe there's any value to it are starting to change their mind. And that's because of tokenization. That's because of stable coins. People who say they don't understand Bitcoin, the first thing I say is, do you actually understand the system you're playing in as it is right now? The second thing is, there are only three moats in my lifetime that I believe. Religion has lasted for thousands of years. Gold has lasted for thousands of years. Bitcoin has been chosen by hundreds of millions of people around the world since the white paper came out as a place of a store of value. The store of values that people invest in today, their house, bonds, private equity, private credit, stocks, I don't care what it is. They have a belief system in those, and they believe there's a mathematical side to it. So as long as the math is real, it's fine. So what we talked about before, I believe in abundance. So what I would say to those people is, Bitcoin is a hedge against abundance. If we're heading to a world of abundance, I think 5% of your portfolio, of your wealth that you've accumulated over time always deserves to have some insurance policy, just like your house or your car or anything. So if you want to keep your wealth, why not put 5% into the asset that young people believe is a real asset, and they're getting more money every day handed down from people who are taking Ozempic and not surviving long enough to actually live their life that they want to live. So let's take some of that money. So Bitcoin is a hedge against abundance.
You talk about 5%. How much of your personal portfolio is in Bitcoin?
I don't get into what it's.
Bitcoin is range bound near $63,460 today with 390 million in weekly ETF outflows, keeping broader momentum subdued. The specific altcoin leaders this week tell a more interesting story. Hyperliquid's Hype gained approximately 8% on the week, and Chainlink outperformed significantly. Both of these tokens share a specific characteristic that CoinDesk executives identified in separate coverage this week as the new investor framework. Crypto investors are starting to judge tokens on usage, economics, and value capture rather than market cap rank. Hype is the native token of a decentralized perpetuals exchange generating real trading fee revenue. Chainlink is the Oracle network that every tokenized asset on every blockchain depends on for real-world data feeds. Both have visible, measurable economic activity behind their valuations. UBS's disclosure that it held $89.7 million in BlackRock's IBIT ETF in its Q2 2026 filing is the week's quietly important institutional data point. UBS is the world's largest wealth manager by assets under management. Its IBIT position is not a proprietary trading bet. It is the kind of position that appears in a major bank's filing when the asset has been approved for client portfolio use within the bank's internal compliance framework. This is institutional adoption moving from the ETF product layer into the wealth management advisory layer. SafePal disclosed a data breach affecting order information for 40,000 customers. Private keys and seed phrases confirmed secure, while Binance announced it will halt all transaction processing for HTX and 10 additional platforms beginning August 23, continuing the post-tornado cash pattern of exchange-level compliance enforcement expanding its scope. Jordi Visser's most important macro observation, built from decades of institutional portfolio management, is the one that Wall Street's traditional wealth management industry is most reluctant to state plainly. The 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, is dead, not underperforming, not challenged, not due for a rebalancing debt. The foundational assumption of the 60-40 framework was that stocks and bonds move in opposite directions. When equities fall, flight to safety capital flows into bonds, their prices rise, and the bond portion of the portfolio cushions the equity drawdown.
Stocks and into silver. So I own silver, I own gold, I own copper, I own countries that mine those things, I own stocks that mine those things. So I'm a very big believer in scarce assets. So my videos are all focused on being long scarcity and short abundance. I don't believe in owning any software companies that are SaaS related. I think they will be disrupted by AI. I don't own any of the hyperscalers at this point. I'm fully focused on the companies that make assets that people can't get right now that are in shortage. They won't be in shortage forever, but they will be for the next few years.
What about real estate? Should someone in his or her 20s or 30s, you have kids, should someone in his or 20s or 30s put all their efforts into working hard to buy a house, which our parents would be so proud of?
I would be extremely happy if my kids would never own a home. I am definitely, my oldest daughter has called me the world's oldest millennial because of things like this. I just believe mobility is an option you always want to have. And I don't think it's ever been more important than it is today. It's the largest percentage of my net worth at this point. Now, again, anyone who invests in Bitcoin from 2020 on, it's almost impossible not to, because you're talking about something that's up over 10 times, even with the level it is today. So for everyone listening, I've never sold any of it. So the way that you accumulate wealth like Warren Buffett is if you believe in something and it was a small percentage of your portfolio at the beginning, and then it does so well, it becomes the largest portion. So,
do you consider selling Bitcoin one day?
Maybe. I have no interest whatsoever in selling it as of today. I don't even think it's gotten anywhere near where it's going to get. And just so people know the valuation of it, the total sum of all the assets on the planet Earth are about $750 trillion, and crypto is $2.7 trillion. I believe in abundance, the fiat assets go down and the crypto assets go higher. Bitcoin is the only beneficiary of the crypto assets that I know for a fact will be here 10 years from now. No offense to all the people out there who like all these other things, but it's the only one I'm sure of will be here in 10 years. There will be plenty that do better than Bitcoin over the next 10 years, but it's the only one I can say with certainty will still be here. And just so people realize, Ford is still a company. It's been around for over 100 years. If you own the stock, it's the exact same price as it was 35 years ago. So
that negative correlation between stocks and bonds held from the early 1980s through approximately 2020 and produced 4 decades of 60-40 outperformance. In the regime that has existed since 2022, quantitative tightening, higher for longer rates, persistent structural inflation, both stocks and bonds fall simultaneously when the macro environment deteriorates. There is no cushion. The hedge does not work. The portfolio is not balanced. His second most important observation is the one that inverts conventional wisdom about who gets disrupted by AI first. Not blue-collar workers, but white-collar knowledge workers, lawyers, doctors, financial analysts, programmers, researchers. The intuition that manufacturing jobs and physical labor are most vulnerable to automation is historically grounded in prior rounds of technology adoption. But AI's specific capability set targets cognitive tasks rather than physical ones. A robot that can handle assembly line work is an engineering challenge involving hardware, sensors, and physical manipulation. An AI that can review contracts, diagnose conditions from imaging, analyze financial statements, or generate code operates entirely in the information domain where computational costs have been collapsing exponentially. The highest-earning professionals in modern economies are the people whose entire productive output is information processing, and those are the jobs that AI replaces first. Jordi Visser's most analytically precise argument is the one that has the most direct implications for the FOMC September decision. The Federal Reserve's inflation models are structurally incapable of measuring what is actually happening to prices in an AI-driven economy. The Consumer Price Index measures a basket of goods and services defined decades ago, updated periodically but fundamentally anchored to a pre-AI conception of what the economy produces and consumes. When AI improves the quality of software, reduces the labor cost of professional services, increases the efficiency of supply chains, and compresses the time cost of information retrieval, none of those productivity gains show up as price decreases in the CPI basket. The goods are better, the services are faster, the information is more accurate, but the CPI does not capture quality improvements or efficiency gains, only price changes for specified goods. The practical implication is that actual inflation is lower than the CPI reports, because the CPI cannot capture the deflationary force of AI productivity improvements that Raoul Pal called a nuclear bomb and that Jordi Visser describes from a more technical measurement angle. The Fed is therefore tightening policy against an inflation number that overstates actual inflationary pressure, which means the three FOMC dissenters who wanted a hike in July are fighting a problem that is smaller than their models suggest. The September FOMC decision that markets are treating as a coin flip between hold and hike may actually be a much clearer case for a hold than the official data implies. If the Fed updates its measurement framework to account for AI productivity gains, the data tells a substantially different story than the 3.4% CPI reading does in isolation. Jordi Visser's investment conclusion from his macro framework is the same as Raoul Pal's and Saylor's, but arrives via a completely different analytical path. Bitcoin and gold are the only real assets that provide genuine protection in an environment where every paper asset is being diluted at machine speed. His logic is the mirror image of his 60-40 analysis. If bonds no longer hedge equities, and if both can fall simultaneously during periods of combined monetary and fiscal stress, then the only assets that are structurally non-correlated to the traditional stock-bond complex are hard assets with fixed or scarce supply. Gold has played this role for centuries. Bitcoin is the digital expression of the same property. Fixed supply, no counterparty, no debasement mechanism, available to a generation that grew up with digital native assets as their primary financial interface. The generational wealth transfer argument Jordi Visser makes is the most specific version of the demand forecast available. Approximately $70 to $90 trillion of wealth is transferring from the baby boomer generation to millennials and Generation Z over the next 2 decades. The boomer generation accumulated wealth primarily in equities and real estate, the assets that performed best in the 40-year post-Bretton Woods bull market in paper assets. The Millennial and Generation Z cohort, when presented with the same preservation need that boomers solved with gold and dividend stocks, is reaching for Bitcoin. Not because they are naive about volatility, they have lived through multiple Bitcoin cycles, but because they are correctly identifying Bitcoin as the digital native equivalent of gold. Scarce, portable, seizure-resistant, and not subject to the printing decisions of any central bank. The $70 to $90 trillion transfer is the structural demand tailwind that no macro analysis of Bitcoin can ignore. Let me bring this together. The SEC canceled its crypto rulemaking vote. The Clarity Act is at 10% passage probability for 2026 according to Galaxy Research. The White House crypto meeting is Tuesday. Bitcoin at $63,460 with $390 million in weekly ETF outflows. UBS holds $89.07 million in IBIT. The range-bound period has now extended for multiple weeks. Jordi Visser's framework explains why all of this is exactly what you should expect at this stage of a generational transition. The 60-40 portfolio that allocated the last 40 years of boomer wealth into stocks and bonds is dead, which means the $70 to $90 trillion transfer heading toward millennials and Gen Z is not going to follow the same allocation path. The Fed's inflation models cannot capture AI-driven productivity gains, which means the central bank is tighter than the actual economy requires, which is why the Bitcoin macro dependency is creating range-bound prices while the structural adoption story accelerates anyway. AI is replacing white-collar knowledge workers first, which is why every Goldman, every UBS, every Bank Leumi is building Bitcoin product infrastructure now before their own advisory client base demands it. The SEC cancellation and the Clarity Act delay are regulatory noise inside a structural signal. The UBS IBIT position is the structural signal. Bitcoin and gold are the only real assets in a world where every paper asset is being diluted at machine speed. The White House meeting Tuesday is the most important near-term catalyst. That is it for today's Money Talks. Mash that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Does the White House meeting on August 19 produce a crypto policy signal that breaks Bitcoin above $64,000, or does the SEC cancellation and Clarity Act delay extend the range-bound period until September's FOMC? I will see you in the next one.